Hello, Who Dat Nation, and a special hello to our Bayou Blitz family. So glad you're tuning in to a special Bayou Blitz broadcast of a draft NFL draft breakdown. And I know we've done a couple of them leading up to the draft. We're hoping to fit in a couple more before our 3-day live draftathon. And I am Bob Rose. I am one of your co-hosts to your Bayou Bliss podcast. Joining me on the other side of the screen is your other co-host to your Bayou Blitz podcast, Brendan Boylan. Brendan, thanks for joining me on our most latest project.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Draft time is the best time for you and I. Draftathon quickly approaching, which is always fun because, well, if you haven't joined in the years past, it can get a little weirder than the normal podcast does, which may be hard to believe. But exciting times. We have a new logo. It's up in the corner. You know what you guys think? I'll have some more details about that coming out. Maybe some uses of that logo. It was long overdue. Like,
yeah,
2 years. Never really had anything officially put together. Had kind of used we had a bridge quarterback of a logo for 2 years. Now
yeah.
We've got the franchise guy. We'll see if the Saints do something similar, but we're not here to talk about quarterbacks. I'm so sick and tired of talking about
refuse.
We're done. We're done. All right. So we instead are going to highlight some defensive players because, look, obviously the position that shall not be named for the rest of the show gets a lot of attention throughout draft time, and especially this year. The Saints have been linked. They haven't drafted this position in the first round since Archie Manning, like 50 years ago, which is also insane.
I'm younger than that, Brendan.
Well, look, I wasn't going to say anything, but you did. You called yourself old today. I didn't have to. Oh, man. But let's talk about some defensive players, because there was a long period between the end of the regular season and through maybe the first wave or two of free agency, really, for the Saints, where a lot of people believed and a lot of people projected the Saints to go defense with the 9th pick. Shoot, I wrote an article for Athlon Sports. One of my very first articles for Athlon was about the Saints' current sports book odds for position draft. And at that time, it was heavily favored that the Saints were going to go either defensive end or defensive back. So, naturally, what are we going to talk about today, Bob? I think we should start with defensive back, because for a while that was the position. And there was a certain player that was mocked to the Saints for a long time, and now all of a sudden he's really slid down the board in the first round. So much so where, like, maybe if the Saints wanted to double up in the first round, they could trade back if they really like this guy. Let's start with Will Johnson, the corner out of Michigan. Again, a guy that was somewhere in probably like the 8 to 15 range for a while. Early in mocks, and now all of a sudden, Will is looking like he's going to be somewhere in the 20s, a pretty big tumble for the Michigan Wolverine. But let's talk about him, because I think one of the more interesting things about Will Johnson is, well, I guess the tricky part, right? He has some health concerns. And that's been a thing. He's only a junior, but has had health concerns during his collegiate career. And there's been some questions about the longevity, not just of his health, but his speed as well. Like, is his speed going to be able to make that leap to being a guy who could be a true, like, man-to-man cover corner in the NFL? So, Bob, what have you seen on tape of Will Johnson, and do you think those statements are accurate to the prospect?
I'll address the latter question first. I don't think his lack of elite speed is going to affect him that much. I mean, you're talking about, let's look at cornerbacks like Patrick Surtain, Marshawn Lattimore. even Darrell Rivas back in the day. I mean, those guys weren't going to win many 100-meter sprints, against world-class competition, even 40-meter sprints, against the fastest players in the NFL, but they were fast enough. And I'd say that Will Johnson fits in that category. I love his technical abilities, as a press man corner. He seems to have, he looks like he has great route recognition, like the type of route recognition and anticipatory skills of a seasoned veteran. And when you're coming into the NFL, that's usually your biggest issue. Is that you maybe are a little over aggressive. And several cornerbacks that I have scouted, and done pieces on for Athlon Sports already, I'll list that as a weakness, is that they tend to get over aggressive and could be vulnerable against play fakes, misdirections, double moves. I don't see that out of Will Johnson, not as a press man corner and not in off ball coverage. I think he's not my favorite cornerback in this draft, but I think that he is probably the most pro ready. And I, like you, am surprised, to see him slip in a lot of recent mock drafts. I think one reason is because we're seeing quarterbacks, wide receivers, and offensive linemen make a late push for the top half of the first round. Well, when that happens, somebody's got to be pushed down, and I'm noticing it with two players. I'm noticing it with Alabama off-ball linebacker Jaheed Campbell, and I'm noticing it with Will Johnson as well. And like I said, I think that Johnson is the most pro ready. There are some weaknesses in his game. In college, he had a little bit of trouble, with shifty receivers, which means he projects to have some difficulty if they move him into the, if a team moves him into the slot, but he's built like an outside press corner. He's a taller guy, 6'2", 203, but he doesn't really have a lanky build. It's a muscular build. He has a physical style of play. That style of play will transition and match up well, against some of the bigger receivers that he will face, in the NFL. And he certainly has the athleticism and enough straight line speed, to match up with most receivers all over the field. And he has very good fluid athleticism, change of direction skills. A little bit tight, which again gives him problems against shifty receivers. But as far as his natural coverage ability, again, I think he's the most pro ready day one plug and play guy at the position in this year's draft.
I'm glad you said what you did about offensive linemen and quarterbacks shooting up recent draft boards and seeing a guy like Will Johnson slip. Could you see this potentially be a situation similar to what Kool-Aid McKinstry went through just a draft ago, where a lot of people had a first-round grade on Kool-Aid McKinstry? Now, albeit a little bit different than Will Johnson, because Kool-Aid had a bottom half of the first-round type of grade,
Mm-hmm.
ends up falling into the second round. Could you see a situation where Will Johnson falls towards the latter part of night one and maybe someone trades back into the first round to get a talent?
Yeah, it's possible, but I think if Will falls that far, then maybe as early as the round one draft coverage, or shortly after. If Will falls that far, then things will start to be leaked about, he didn't interview well, or maybe he had some character concerns at Michigan, that were sort of covered up, for as long as possible. No, I don't see Will Johnson falling that far, but I certainly, you comparing it to the Kool-Aid McKinstry situation, I do see some similarities there. Now, the big difference is Kool-Aid early in last year's draft process was projected by several to be middle of the first round, and then dropped until fairly early in the second round. Will Johnson was an almost consensus top 10 pick coming into the draft, and now slipping in recent weeks. I can see some movement with him. There are basically three cornerbacks that I'm watching to see how their story unfolds night one. Will Johnson, Jahdae Barron from Texas, who's my favorite cornerback in the draft, Siobhan Ravel from East Carolina. Those are the three that I feel pretty confident that will be drafted somewhere in the first round. And the first one to come off the board, the first team that blinks and does it, I think that you'll see the other two fall in quick succession after that.
Well, let's talk about Barron because you're the one who brought him up. And I think the most interesting thing about Barron is a lot of people now are considering him the number one corner in his
Mm-hmm.
class. Will Johnson, or at least early on in this process, seemed to be the consensus number one. We've now got a little bit of changing of the guards, if you will. Uh, but Barron has some sneaky ties to the New Orleans Saints now because of one of their hires. You pointed this out a lot when that hire happened.
Mm-hmm.
Is hey, look, what can we see between the New Orleans Saints and the Texas Longhorns? Not just in this draft, but maybe the next few drafts. So, Bob, take it away there. First, what do you like about Barron, and let's tell people about these ties between Texas and New Orleans.
Well, I mean, Barron is my number one rated cornerback in the draft, and don't or make no mistake, I love this cornerback class. I think that you could get potential starting quality depth well into day two, and maybe a couple of sneaky gems into day three. And at the cornerback position, that's highly unusual. Usually once you get out of the second round, it's rare to strike gold at all. Because this position is scouted so heavily. I do think that there's some good quality talent well into this draft. It's a deeper cornerback position than I can remember covering, for sure. And I talked about this on, when I did an interview with on Eric Asher's show, Tuesday afternoon. But Barron is my favorite cornerback in this class because he's athletic and he's just got that dog in him. I know people talk about Will Johnson that way too, but Barron I think is better athletically. He's a little bit more of a playmaker, a little bit more aggressive. But that again, that's one of his weaknesses as a young cornerback. He's going to be susceptible to perhaps double moves, and real crafty receivers. Not as physical as Johnson. He's on the shorter side, a little, tad below 6 feet. He looks, and when you look at him, he looks like a sprinter. Looks like a sprinter that plays football, and kind of plays like that. He's not real physical in the open field. Not a great tackler, not going to be mistaken for a safety playing cornerback or anything like that. He's just a pure cornerback, with slot and outside corner versatility. Now, because of his height, some taller receivers, bigger physical receivers might give him some trouble, but he doesn't back down from a physical challenge. So he's fast, he's physical and aggressive, he just. He just, to me, he has that it factor about him. And one of the things I like about Barron in relation to the Saints, there are four defensive backs, all of whom are going to be hear their names selected before the end of round three. That played for Terry Joseph in college. Two of them are at Notre Dame. Safety is Xavier Watts and cornerback Benjamin Morrison. One of those corners, starting quality corners, you're going to see out of day two, because Terry Joseph was at Notre Dame before he came to Texas. So he either coached or played a heavy part in recruiting both Benjamin Morrison and Xavier Watts. And then the Texas safety, Andrew Makuba. I think he's going to come off the board before round four as well. But Barron is better than all four. He's a plug and play guy. And again, his relationship to Terry Joseph, who's going to be the secondary coach and defensive passing game coordinator for the New Orleans Saints. One of the things about rookie cornerbacks that sometimes delay their, delay their learning curve a bit is just learning the nuances, playing against NFL caliber offenses, NFL caliber receivers. That no doubt stunts their learning curve. Uh, Barron having familiar ties with Terry Joseph, who I grant you is not the defensive coordinator, but he's going to play a heavy influence in those defensive meetings. That's going to help along the learning curve for a guy like Barron or any of the other three defensive backs should they find their way into the New Orleans Saints draft room.
Let's flip this a little bit and go to edge rusher, which is going to be a big topic in New Orleans. One, because Cameron Jordan's getting older and has lost a step or two. I don't think anybody's afraid to admit that at this point. Chase Young comes back, but he'll be in a different role because of the 3-4 defense. Maybe it's better suited to him. Maybe it's not. Only time will tell. But this is a Saints team that's going to the 3-4 for the first time in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And there are quite a bit of draft prospects that would fit this system very well, which makes things intriguing for the Saints, whether it be at 9, whether it be at 40, or anywhere else where the Saints may be selecting. So I want to start with a guy from a school that used to have some decent ties to New Orleans. Now, this, again, is from a while ago, but correct me if I'm wrong or if I'm crazy, Bob, but don't you remember there was a lot of Georgia New Orleans Saints in like the early to mid 2010s? It just seemed like whether it be in round 1 or all the way in round 5, 6, and 7, where Georgia Bulldogs just magically found themselves a member of the New Orleans Saints. I'm thinking John Jenkins, Damian Swan was a Bulldog. Right? The list can go on. And I'm not talking about superstar guys, but there was a little bit of a pipeline there. Maybe they go that route once again with a guy like Jalon Walker, the linebacker. Look, I think the interesting thing when it comes to Walker is I don't know if he slides past 8, but there's a lot of talk about that 8th pick getting traded. The Carolina Panthers right in front of the New Orleans Saints. I think Walker makes a lot of sense for the Panthers. I think he makes a lot of sense for but who knows what the Panthers even select there? That's a different story for a different day. What do you like about the national champion in Walker?
Well, there's 2 Georgia edge rushers that I love, in this draft. First of all, I love the edge rusher class. Just like at cornerback, I think it's a deep class, and I think a lot of the standout ones are stand-up outside linebackers or edge rushers, guys that would fit into Brandon Staley's 3-4 scheme. So I'll say this: if the Saints don't get a cornerback at 9, they can get a good one at 40. And I could say the same thing about edge rushers. If the Saints don't get one at 9, they could still get one at 40, and perhaps even with a later pick in day 2. I'm not saying Jalon Walker or Mykel Williams, the other Georgia edge rusher. Neither one of them are going to make it past the first round. And at least one of them, I agree with you, probably Walker, is going to come off the board, with a top 10 selection. I had Williams going, at 9 to the Saints in my first mock draft, done right at the start of free agency. But I acknowledged even then that I think Walker is the better overall player. The thing I love about Walker is he brings versatility to your scheme. He's not just an edge rusher. He also worked at off-ball linebacker for the Georgia Bulldogs, for an outstanding Georgia Bulldog team. And if I'm being frank, I think that that's where his future lies, depending on the system that he ends up in. Now, we've watched Demario Davis for the last several years. One of the many things that make Demario Davis so special is Demario's yes, anticipation, instincts, versatility, but he has rushed the passer really, really well as a blitzer. Jalon Walker, he's not the natural coverage linebacker that Demario Davis is. He's still going to have to learn that part of his game a little bit better, but Walker is the better pass rusher right now. Walker has a much better pass rushing upside, and I think that that's why a lot of people project him to edge rusher. Again, depending on the scheme and the system that he goes to, that's how he might make an immediate impact. But he's such a wonderful athlete off of the edge. Now, his versatility is kind of working against him too. Yeah, because I mentioned he really hasn't had a chance to hone his coverage instincts because Georgia used him in so many ways. He also hasn't had a chance to expand his counter rush moves. Once his first move or two is stalled or blocked, he doesn't have any go to counters. So he's going to have to develop that if a team expects him to make an impact as an edge rusher. But he has just such a natural lean around the corner, terrific athlete. Can get on blockers in the blink of an eye. Which if you have that ability, then it's going to be easy to add counter moves, whether it's a spin, a swim move, anything like that, just pure bull rush, because you're on top of that blocker so quick that you have the leverage advantage. You're on their inside shoulder, or you're already out around their outside shoulder. And that's what Walker brings to me. That's just so impressive. Is just his pure blinding burst, at the snap. And like I said, I love the versatility that he's going to bring to an NFL defense. If he comes to a 3-4 scheme, I can't wait to see whatever team gets him. I can't wait to see how they use him.
When you say versatility could kind of play against him, a little bit different positionally, but the first guy that comes to mind that just didn't work out in recent years that was what I guess you would call a tweener, is Isaiah Simmons out of Clemson.
Yeah.
Who was a little bit of a tweener between safety and linebacker, and they could never really figure out where he best fit. So I can understand that. I think this is a little bit different when you're talking about an edge rusher or a guy that might be playing in coverage. We'll talk about a recent Saint that kind of fit in that mold and had an outstanding year this last year, and that's Zach Bond, and finally finding his role. So to your point, Bob, I think this gets forgotten about every draft. Where you go in the draft is so vital to how your story as an NFL athlete unfolds. Yes, it is about just one team falling in love with you, but it is also equally just as important that you go somewhere where the coach is going to put you in the best position to shine, and that's why you have good coaches, great coaches, and Hall of Fame coaches, right? Let's talk about another guy. And this is that another junior, but I think this guy is a little bit more of a pure pass rusher, and that's Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M. He's got a hell of a skill set, but I don't even know if he's the best pass rusher in this draft. He has
not even close.
He has a lot of upside. Well, yes, duh. Abdul Carter would be a number one pick in just about any other draft. But I think this kid in Stewart has tremendous upside. But I also think you're drafting him this high because of that upside, not because he's a super polished product yet.
Without a doubt, that's the case. Extremely raw. If the Saints were still running, if Dennis Allen was still in the building running the defense, if the Saints were still running their 4-3, we all know, for better or for worse, the Saints stuck to a certain prototype with their defensive ends, edge rushers, and they never varied from that. And Nick Scorton Nick Scorton and his Texas A&M teammate Shamar Stewart, they both fit that profile to a T. I think the Saints are getting away from that profile now. Stewart, while a good raw pass rusher, I don't think he projects well as a stand-up rusher on the end. He doesn't have that kind of. He's a good straight line speed, but not a real good agile athlete in space. And I think that's what the Saints are going to look for in Brandon Staley's scheme. Plus, is Stewart and Scorton, for that matter, both A&M kids. I'll be honest with you, I don't like either one of them. Not if you're going to depend on them for immediate impact. And maybe it's a little bit of PTSD. The Saints were just
Fair.
the Saints swung and missed on Marcus Davenport, on Peyton Turner, on Isaiah Foskey. Again, players that fit their prototype at the time. With Stewart fitting in that same prototype, and also a fairly alarming lack of collegiate production, consistent collegiate production. Yeah, I know you're playing against SEC competition week after week. I get that. But now you're going to be going against NFL competition week after week. And if you weren't able to perform at a consistent level, especially when you had Scorton on the other side, and this, I could say the same thing about Scorton, in comparison to Stewart. You had natural bookends, and neither one of you were able to be consistently productive. That to me is a giant red flag. Yes, all the physical tools in the world, but I watched the film on. Since you wanted to focus on Stewart, I watched the film on Stewart, and I'm just like, there's something missing from him. The light, maybe the light switch needs to be turned on. Maybe it takes the right coaching. Maybe something like that. Too many maybes. For me to hang my hat on him, not just as a first round pick, but I wouldn't even touch him if he fell to me in the second round.
Mm. Well, let's close out this portion of our draft pick prospect special. When it comes to the defensive side of the ball, with the guy that you've already mentioned, let's talk about Mykel Williams, the edge rusher out of Georgia. He's an interesting one because he's fell, kind of like Will Johnson. He's a guy that has continued to fall down there. I've seen him as low as like 30 in some mocks, which to me is insane because there's a lot of skill and a lot of talent there.
Mm-hmm.
You've already touched on it a little bit. Why would he make a good selection for the Saints? Maybe not at 9, but if the rumors are true that the Saints may be looking to trade back into the bottom half of the first round or even move up into the early goings of the second.
Again, in early March when I put out my first 7-round mock, that was my guy at number 9 for the Saints. So I wouldn't have a major problem if the Saints did select him, at 9, or Walker at 9, because this is an edge rushing spot for the Saints that had 17 combined sacks from all of them last year, 16 the year before that. You're having elite guy, the elite guys are around that total by themselves year after year. So clearly the Saints need a lot more production. They need a finisher out of this group. Chase Young, I think he's proven he's not a finisher. Carl Granderson, not a finisher. Cam Jordan, no longer a finisher. They need a finisher. And that's what I like about Mykel Williams. There's some things to clean up in his game. He comes in, too upright in his pass rush at times and allows blockers to get under his shoulder pads. And if that happens, you're done, folks. You're not going anywhere. I don't care what kind of speed. I don't care what kind of strength you have. You lose that leverage battle and you're finished for that play. So he'll have to clean that up, but that can be cleaned up with coaching. Coaching and reps. He has a wonderful bend around the corner. He just, what his bend around the corner looks like to me? It looks like a Von Miller. He's that explosive around the edge. And as a result of that speed and burst around the end, and lean and bend, he's managed to develop a little bit of a counter inside move. So when he does catch a tackle flat-footed, or when he does go up against the Trevor Pennings of the world, boom, he's on their inside shoulder in a flash. And no quarterback in the league likes pressure, but every quarter, and I'm talking 100 out of 100 quarterbacks polled will tell you they would rather get the pressure from the outside, than from the inside right in their face. And Mykel Williams, when he sets up those tackles for that inside counter move of his, and he just has a finishing, again, it's that F word, a finishing burst to get into that backfield. He looks to me like a consistent double-digit sack per year guy. And that's something that the Saints have lacked on their roster since Cam Jordan started his decline a couple years ago.
The F word. Maybe not your favorite F word, but a very important F word when it comes to the New Orleans Saints. Honestly, we could go back and exclude Cam Jordan from this conversation. Like, you could probably count on maybe 3 fingers over the last 10 years, the amount of guys that have played for the Saints that were like true finishers.
Hmm.
Um, Trey Hendrickson um,
For 1 year.
for 1 year, and then he went on his way and had an outstanding year.
Trey Henderson 1 year before money. Junior Gillette for 1 year before he went psychotic. Those are the only ones I can
Those
think
are the
of.
ones you got. Not Carl Granderson for about 8 games.
I no, because again, yeah, you have to show me that you can do it for an entire season. And I love Carl. Don't get me wrong. I am still glad he is on this team. And I think both Carl Granderson and Chase Young, you're going to see those sack totals go up, maybe exponentially, if they get a finisher. If this team has that guy that's going to keep opposing offensive coordinators up at night and keep opposing quarterbacks up at night, just trying to figure out a way, how are we going to contain this guy? Because if we don't, he's going to destroy our game plan. Those guys are rare to find. The T.J. Watts, the J.J. Watts, the Lawrence Taylors, the Ricky Jacksons, the Pat Swillings. They don't come along every draft. They don't come along all the time. But if you find one, that makes your entire defense better. If the Saints had one, that all of a sudden makes Chase Young and or Carl Granderson an automatic 10-sack guy, because they're going to be facing single team blocking all the time, and it's not going to be the opposition's best blocker, because all that is going to be devoted to stopping the guy if you can find him.
Yeah, game breakers, super important. And I mean, the game breaker that comes to mind that actually ended up winning a championship, um, and Aaron Donald, like that's like the perfect example. Uh, but you brought up the Watts and the trouble that they've caused to many, many, many offensive lines during their careers. Right? You look at a guy like Khalil Mack,
Mm-hmm.
who hasn't necessarily been a part of a team that's made a deep run, but a guy that no matter where he's gone, he's been like a problem. The Saints haven't had that, right? Like Cameron Jordan, the perfect model of consistency for like 10 years, and just being a consistent guy that you did have to game plan around. But he wasn't a guy that ever came out and was going to uh, single-handedly change the game. I think part of that is because the supporting cast was so bad for so many years.
Yes.
Outside of the your Junior Gillette year, I think the supporting cast was always really bad. But the Saints could absolutely use that. And I wanted to make sure we dedicated some time to talk about some of those prospects in the first round. Obviously, if you hang out with us through the draftathon, Bob and I will talk about I don't know, maybe 487 different prospects during the course of the day or 3
Oh
days.
yeah. Oh yeah, and again, there's 3 or 4 edge rushers, that I've profiled, or that I'm about to profile before the draft, and articles, that can be real difference makers that I think are going to last until day 2, and a couple other round 1 prospects, to watch for, not just for the Saints but throughout the league. James Pierce Jr. is a kid I love from Tennessee, a pure pass rusher. Some others love Mike Green from Marshall. To me, again, that gives me Davenport, Peyton Turner flashbacks, but I could see why people love Green. Donovan, I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce his last name, but the kid from Boston College, and a kid I'm going to be talking a lot about early in day 2, is Princely, you man alien. And I'm sure I butchered that name, from Ole Miss. I kind of hope the Saints get him so A, I can learn to pronounce his name, and B, I can just call him the Humanian Devil.
That's a good one. You know what? Go ahead, call his agent and make sure that's a thing on draft night. You go ahead and get to that. Bob and I will be back. We're going to do at least one more of these, maybe profiling some positions that aren't as highly spoken of right now, and also some of our just favorite prospects going into the draft. So, Bob, in the meantime, you have plenty of different players to profile with Athlon Sports. Where can people follow you and your work, as we are just a few days away from the NFL draft?
Folks, real quick, you can follow me, all of us, on Athlon Sports, Inside the Saints, where we do the coverage for your New Orleans Saints. I also post all of those articles, my personal articles, on my social media platforms, which is Bob Rose on Facebook, at Bobby R 2613 over on Twitter. And make sure I released I published a couple on Monday afternoon, Monday morning, Monday afternoon. That I had a real a whole lot of fun doing. Kind of my Easter eggs pieces that I do every Easter, either Easter Day or somewhere around it. Small school prospects, kids that have come from schools that the average NFL fan maybe has never heard of or never thought of when it comes to the NFL draft. The Saints have had a lot of success over the years. Teron Armstead from Arkansas Pine Bluff, David Onyemata from Manitoba. I could go on and on, but I did an offensive Easter egg piece and a defensive Easter egg piece. So check that out on Inside the Saints through Athlon Sports. And like Brendan said, make sure you check out all of our pieces, not only up to, but draft reaction pieces, draft fit pieces, everything. Our draft coverage does not end when the NFL draft ends.
Absolutely not. You can follow me. Well, actually, real quick, Bob, I know it wasn't in that Easter eggs article, but I'm just waiting for the day where you and I are doing a draftathon and it's the seventh round and the pick comes in and it is the New Orleans Saints select blah, 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 blah from Gardner Webb University. Because that'll be the quickest jersey I will ever buy in my
Yes, sir.
entire life. I'm waiting for it. Small school kids can make a difference in the NFL. FCS kids can make a difference in the NFL. But you can follow me virtually everywhere at BT Boylan. Like I said, Bob and I will be back with another one of these. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Bayou Blitz Pod. Until next time, that's Bob. I'm Brendan. See you later.